You know, as a broadcaster and a writer, I've always wondered how, when you hear these stories about women who've dated famous men and celebrities and they end up getting pregnant and they have this baby, and it always seems as though the woman is the gold digger, the woman is the scarlet, and you can see the machines over time that have been used and put in place to just destroy the woman. I've always wondered, who are these women? How does this come about? Have you ever wondered when you read the tabloids? I don't know how many of you have heard the name Lunden Roberts. Probably doesn't mean anything to you. She's an author of Out of the Shadows. And once I tell you what the book is about, you're going to say, oh my God, and you're going to reach a conclusion and make judgments. But tonight, I don't want you to make any judgments about Lunden Roberts, except what she has to say about her story. She is the author of Out of the Shadows, her life inside the wild world of Hunter Biden. Yes, Lunden Roberts just happens to be someone who had a child by Hunter Biden. And she joins us tonight to tell her story. And there she is. Lunden, where did you grow up?
Arkansas.
What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my dad has built an extremely popular gun empire, or a custom gun shop in the hunting industry. He's very well known. And my mother was actually secretary at the school that I went to growing up.
So you're not a gold digger?
No, sir.
No. And so how did you, so where did you attend college?
Arkansas State University.
You didn't complete your studies, why?
I did.
Oh,
I did.
see?
I got my bachelor's degree at Arkansas State.
Now, you know what? I read you never completed your education. Something's not true. You're getting a chance to tell your story. And so, but did you also do a background in forensics?
Yes, that I did not finish. I did not complete that.
Yeah, but you got your bachelor's degree. So what has been your career trajectory?
Well, so far, I'm back working for my dad in the family business and enjoying that. But I always wanted to be like a forensic psychologist or work in crime scenes and do that work, which is what ultimately, sent me to D.C. and how I led onto the path to meeting my child's father.
So you're not married?
No, sir.
This is your first child?
Yes.
When you were growing up and you had your father, because I can tell you're very close to your father, you're very close to your mother. I'm sure your father set an example of the kind of man you wanted as a husband and to be the father of your child.
That's true. He set the standards high.
Yeah, but did you live up to that standard by the person that you ended up with and you ended up having this child that you adore and love?
No, not during that time.
No. So how did you meet Hunter? And listen, here's the other thing. I read in his book where he said he doesn't even remember the night. He doesn't even remember what happened. He was just as shocked as anybody else. He said, in other words, what he was saying, it was like a quickie, there was no connection, and it just happened. How do you describe that? Because I don't want to do anything to take away from the fact that a child was conceived in that moment. What is your side of the story?
Well, his child wasn't conceived the night that we first met. There have been several nights and several encounters. I knew him for well over a year. But if you're speaking about my first encounter with him and first time meeting him, like what I thought, my take on it?
Yes.
Different, chaotic, wild. But here's a man with, all this paraphernalia in front of him and obviously battling a demon and in a horrible place. And instantly I'm intrigued. I should have ran out the door, but I just continued on.
How long after you initially met with him before you guys decided to become intimate?
We had known each other probably for some weeks before we became intimate for the first time.
But you had to know that he had addiction issues right away, correct?
I did. I was aware.
But you chose to sleep with him. Why? What was it about him that you decided to allow him to bed you, knowing that this guy had all kinds of problems?
That's a good question, and it's part of the Hunter package I describe in the book. You know, he comes with so much charm, and you know what he's doing right in front of you might seem like, you know, crazy and far-fetched, and you just run from it. But he comes with so much charm, and there's so many stories in here that I can tell you, you know, that I talk about where it shows his kindness, his generosity, but I also have this empathy for him because he had this demon on his back and he was struggling. But inside him, there was endless potential and such a great person. Really? And I know that doesn't sound like it would go together, right?
You know what? You've heard the line that good girls like bad boys.
Yes. I think I fell victim to that line a time or two.
Now, what I'm saying here is that you were a good girl, but you got caught. I know a lot of good girls that like bad boys. They don't want good guys. They want bad boys. Did you see him as a bad boy?
Yes. Yes, Hunter, he gave that off. He was always kind of, you know, the black sheep of the family, or so he felt. And, yeah, he definitely came off as the red flag, but...
So tell us, take us through how he was able to draw you in, where you ended up, I'm not going to say I'm not even going to say you fell in love with him, but something happened out of empathy. It may have been pity sex. You know how people talk about pity sex, sympathy sex? It may have been that. I don't know. What don't you tell us in your own words?
Well, it's like I said. You know, even though he was battling this addiction and it was laid out in front of me, there was this kindness and this generosity. There's so many, for example, in the book, there's a story, and this is like, people ask me all the time, like, you know, can you tell me like what his personality's like? And he's like, he will go out of his way, regardless of the state that he's in, to help people. And it's just like, there's a time where we were going to New York City and we're on the Amtrak, and there's an elderly lady there. And she didn't have a watch or a phone or anything. And it was late at night. It was like the last train, I guess, that night. And, you know, she turns around asking what time it was. And I go into detail. It's a long story in the book. But because she didn't have a phone, because she was an elderly lady, Hunter goes out of his way to make sure that she gets off on the right stop and puts her there where at the light that she's supposed to meet her family at, where they're going to pick her up. And then, you know, comes back and he runs back, rushes back, makes it back on the train, sits down beside me, and then they get over the loudspeaker and they're like, next stop, and it was like Newark, New Jersey, and he was like, that was the stop that I was supposed to put her at, and that's the next stop. And like, so he goes above and beyond to go try to stop the train. He ends up getting off at the next stop, going back and getting this lady, completely postponing his plans to take care of her, because, you know, he had made a mistake. And you see that, and in the moment, you know, he's going out of his way to help these people, even though he's in this crazy state of mind as far as, you know, battling addiction. There's still goodness in there.
Did you help him with his addiction, or did you join in his addiction?
No, I wouldn't say I helped or joined in his addiction. I feel guilty in some parts of the book, and I speak about, you know, feeling like maybe I enabled it. Because there were times that, you know, we talked about his addiction. And there were times where, like, you know, I'm no saint. I'd go out, party, drink, do all that stuff. And he was really suffering. And there are times that, you know, we would talk about it, and we had discussions, and he owned his addiction. He always, from the beginning, I give him that credit. He would say, you know, I'll stop when I want to stop. You know, nobody can make me stop. I'm going to do this for me. And when I do it for me, it'll be on my time when I'm ready. And I'm not ready. Was
he married at the time when you met him?
No, he was separated, I believe, at the time. His divorce was, I think, final, like that next, like February or something like that. He was separated at the time. He was living in a garage loft over on near like Chain Bridge, where Joe and Jill's had a place there.
So Lunden, how did you guys meet?
I actually met him at an after party at Rosemont Seneca.
Now, what do you say to those people who try to say that you are a stripper and that's that's how he met you at some club. Is there any truth there?
I say read the book.
Okay. You answered the question. You answered the question. That's okay. You answered the question. But I'm moving on from that because you answered the question. When did you realize he was the son of Joe Biden?
In our first sitting.
Oh, how did that come up?
Well, we actually have a conversation. I'm actually sitting in a chair as I'm talking to him, and the chair said Senator Barack Obama on it. And then I kind of put the two and two together. And I asked him, like, are you kin to? And he says, yeah, that's my dad. And he acknowledged it with pride.
But he loved his father. He loves him.
Yes.
Yeah. So listen, this was not a one-night stand. You guys had a relationship.
On and off.
On and off.
I knew him for over a year. And I mean, that's the thing about Hunter I described throughout the book. You don't get a hold of Hunter. Hunter gets a hold of you. And so, there would be times, which I think is a known quality and trait of addiction, people that battle that, they go away and then they come back. Then they're gone for some time and then they show up again. And so it was a lot like that for over that year.
Lunden Roberts is our guest. She is the mother of Hunter Biden's daughter. And she joins us to tell her story out of the shadows. We're not here to make judgments. We're here for Ms. Roberts to tell her story. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
Thank you.
I don't know, Lunden, if it's fair to say that your involvement with the president's only son brought you closer to the Biden family, because people like to talk about his perspective when you had to tell him that you were pregnant, but also you acknowledged that it was so much you considered suicide.
That is true.
That is true. Talk about when reality set in for you.
Reality set in months, a couple months after I had told Hunter. And, telling him, he was supportive in that moment and said that he would be there for me, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, financially, whatever it concerned. He would be there and he'd be present. And he started gradually, just kind of ghosting me. And then when I'd reached out a couple times and hadn't heard anything, I get a phone call from my dad, and he says, you can always come home. And that's exactly what I did. I came home and, I surrounded myself with my family, and I'm fortunate to have such a great family that, backs and supports me. Now, even though there were some hardships, they weren't just real happy about, me being pregnant out of wedlock and knowing the complications that would come, and it would be a scandal. And so it was a lot to deal with at that time. And you become a burden, or I did. I became a burden, felt like, to my family. I'd let them down. I disappointed them. I felt like a burden to Hunter. I felt like I'd let him and his family down, all because, I'm carrying this child that it is eventually a scandal. And it went to a pretty deep place and pretty dark place. And there's chapters about it in my book that were very, very tough to write. And even sometimes still tough for me to go back and read. But yes, you think maybe it's just better off if I wasn't here. But I knew that I wouldn't harm myself as long as I was carrying my child. So there was the thought that I'll have this child and she'll be raised up great by my mom and my dad and my family, but I won't be here to see that.
Well, listen, is it true that he wanted you to abort the baby?
No.
It's not true.
That's not true. He told me initially from the beginning, he made that very clear that it was my choice as a woman, and he would respect that. He would respect what choice I wanted.
What was his drug of choice?
I think he's been pretty candid about his drug of choice, crack cocaine.
Well, knowing that his problems and his addiction did not get any better, you had to come to the realization, this guy can't be here for me. He just can't. He can't stand in the gap for himself.
Yes, but I always held hope. I always had hope that he would come around. You know, there was that hope I talk about throughout the book that, you know, even in a dark place, I had hope. I write, I start journaling, you know, and I start praying all the time during this dark time, that I had hope that he would come around and he'd be a dad, you know, because he had children prior to. And, you know, as far as I know, he was a pretty good dad to them growing up. And I thought that he would do the same for my child, for our child.
Well, didn't it dawn on you? And here's the good thing about you. You did not need Hunter's money. But because it was his child, you felt as a man, he should financially support his child. Did he financially support you through your pregnancy? Because I do know, and this is in your book and other reports, that you had to take him to court for him to step up to the plate as a man.
Well, I wouldn't say financially supported me for my, pregnancy, but, I was on payroll and I was working as his executive assistant and doing certain ins and outs and jobs for him at that time when I was in DC. And then when I left, I kind of made the excuse to the other assistant that I was home. And at that time, I talk about in the book, my dad, this dark place where I come home and I'm lonely and I'm feeling this, like I'm a burden to everyone. Then we get this news that my dad has cancer. And so I'm also watching the strongest man that I know, just his health deteriorate in front of me. And so, Katie Dodge, his other assistant, was aware that I was home with my dad during that time. I never let her know that I was pregnant with Hunter's child, but so there was so much going on during that time that that's why there's so many wild stories. And I tell people all the time, the real story is so much, it's more wild than the media could have portrayed it. everything that happened, everything that's been gone through, and it's worth telling.
I know there was a debate whether the child would bear her father's name, and you worked it out. She has your name. But some people would say, listening to this broadcast tonight, this was Hunter Biden. She wanted that baby to have his name and that legacy. She's the granddaughter of a president of the United States. Come on, there was a part of her, no matter how risky it was, she wanted that baby. What do you say to that?
I say if initially, when she was born on her birth certificate, I could have put that as her last name. There was nothing stopping me from that. Maybe things could have been resolved before then. I think in Arkansas, they might send something off to the father for a paternity thing. And that probably is what I could have done. But, my dad and who he is and the Roberts last name sure does hold a lot of weight around here in Arkansas. He's pretty well known for what he does.
Yeah, but how did it make you feel? And, and genuinely, I can tell that you're sincere. And you're at a good place in your life now, which is a blessing. I'm glad to see that. You're at a very good place in your life. And this is
a lot of prayers to get me here.
Yes, I can tell. And I'm happy you're here. Because you should not be a victim and you should not be the person blamed when two grown people made this decision. But there was a point when he denied that it was his child. And you had to do a DNA test. How was that? Because of his family, his father, and what was going on with his family at the time? Or was that who he really was? Or was he trying to protect the family name?
I can't tell you what his actions were for at that time. I can tell you mine, but I can tell you this. that when it was denied, I told my attorney that I wanted the DNA test, and I said, I don't care what he pays me in child support. I don't care about any of that. But what I do want is for him to take accountability. And that was my main goal throughout all of it. And even when we went to the DNA center to have it done, I told my attorney, and we made it well aware to Hunter's attorneys, he has 7 days. This was before the DNA test, before we were even swabbed. He has 7 days to tell his family the truth. Because I just wanted that accountability. And at that point, I feel like I had been hurt so many times and I'd been put through so much that I just I put it in my attorney's hands, and I said, I just want accountability taken for our child.
Let me raise this with you. How important is it to you that your daughter meet her father's side of the family?
I'll say this. My daughter absolutely adores her father and loves him and gets so excited to see him. And that look on her face the first time she saw him on a Zoom call means the world to me. And as a mother, I can't have enough people love my child. And if they will step in and be good influences and love my child the right way and be the dad and the grandparents and so that they are capable of being with everyone else in their family, then what more could I ask for?
Has Hunter ever held his child?
No, sir.
Has he ever met his child?
No, sir. Only through Zoom.
And when was the last time your daughter had an interaction with her father?
She actually sent him a video. It was Father's Day weekend, this past weekend. And she hadn't talked to him, and she said, can I call him or can I message him? She can send little audio texts and stuff, and she has an iPad and she could do that too. But I said, well, I worry about her calling and not getting that answer on the other line. So I said, why don't we send him a video? You send him a video and you can tell him Happy Father's Day, and then after this, we're going to go to the pool at my mom and dad's and cook out, and she'll, it'll be in the back of her mind. And she sent him a video, and I told her, I said, okay. I said, do you know what you're going to say? And she said, yeah, I'm just going to say Happy Father's Day, Daddy. I love you. And I said, okay. And so I start the video, and she says, Happy Father's Day, Daddy. I love you. You're the best. Hope to see you soon, or maybe I'll come visit you sometime, or something along those lines. And then, that was it. And then she blows him a kiss.
And no reply?
No.
Does that hurt?
Yes.
It does. You know what? I tell you what I appreciate about you. Let me tell you this, okay? I'm just telling you, you're honest. And even when it makes you vulnerable, because the truth hurts, but as long as you're honest and transparent, it also tells us that you're free. You've come to the realization exactly what you're dealing with. And only time can change that. But no matter, one thing that time cannot change is that will always be his daughter.
That's right. That's right. And I think I've gone above and beyond to let her know, this is your father, this is who you come from. And I've spoke greatly about him to her from the beginning. And, there's a story in the book about how, when she learns who her dad is and she learns his name, can I see a picture of him? And so, I show her a picture that I thought was one of the best pictures of him. And she says, well, one day she comes in and she says, Mama, I want to hear my daddy's voice.
Hold that point. I want to hear my daddy's voice. Hold that, Lunden. I'm going to take a quick break. Your voice, your future. Lunden Roberts happens to be the mother of Hunter Biden's daughter. She joins us talking about her book, Out of the Shadows. I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Lunden, how is your father?
He's doing good. He's cancer-free.
He's cancer-free. How cruel or kind are people after learning your story?
How cruel are they after learning it?
Or kind to you and your child?
There's a lot of backlash. There's a lot of people, who find the time in their day to look me up on social media and send hate messages and just horrible things. But there's also women, especially, and some men that take the time out of their day to send me a message and just say, you know what, one day your daughter will be proud of you. And I've even gotten messages where women are like, the fight that you have had for your daughter publicly has inspired me. And, because of you, I've taken action. And now, my child's paternal side has stepped in and, been positive influences, and they had this background. And so the good outweighs the bad. The bad stuff, I shrug off, but the good things that people can say and my story impacting theirs, and that itself speaks, it speaks for itself.
What happens when she goes off to school?
Like to kindergarten?
Yes.
I don't know.
Kids
I worry about her.
Yeah.
But I worry about her I worry about her everywhere she goes. She can be playing in the backyard and I'm worried about her.
Your mother. Can you have relationships now that chapter with Hunter is over in your life?
Relationships like
with men, other men?
Yes. Yes, and I'm sorry.
Have you been able to?
It's not been easy. It's been pretty tough because I think that, most men don't want to step into that situation. And, there's a lot of very, conservative men in this area who aren't ever going to want to be on the same page with who my child's father is. And that's something that either they accept or they get to step in.
They get to step in.
I mean, that's...
Does your daughter know that her grandfather and grandmother are President of the United States and the First Lady?
Yes.
She watches them on TV?
No, recently I try to keep the news and stuff like that off as much as I can. One of the last times she had seen them on the TV, she asked, who were those other people? And it was like an inauguration type picture. And, all Hunter's children were there and Bo's children. And she's seen all of his grandchildren up there. And she was, well, who's that? Well, then who's that? And then I'm explaining it to her. And, the wheels are turning. She's very, very intelligent for her age.
So nobody,
and I know she's wondering why.
So nobody from Hunter's side of the family reaches out to you?
Just Hunter for, Zoom calls for Navy to build that relationship. And I think that was part of the deal. We were going to, start there. Let Hunter have that time to Zoom Navy, build a relationship through art and whatnot. And then that went above and beyond to where he was calling more to talk to her. And
but he is providing you financial support now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Talk about the trial. You know what's fascinating about you is that you're not angry with him. You're not bitter. You're not like some people would say the South. You're not running him down.
It's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming, and it's been a healing journey because, there's times like when the DNA test and, he didn't take accountability and claim that he didn't remember our encounter, and in those chapters where I talk about that, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially a woman whose child is being scorned. And there's some anger. There's some hard times where, even my attorney reaches out at one point before we're to take the DNA test, and he says, do you think that you and Hunter could go in a room together and take a DNA test? And I sit there for a second and I said, I don't know if the Secret Service agents could pull me off of him, I'll be honest, because that's how angry I was. And it's taken a long time, and I've healed. And that's what people are seeing now. They're seeing this healed version of me, and they're thinking, she's crazy. The Bidens are paying her off. There's no way she can give someone this much grace. And I do. I have given it time, and it's taken me 5 years to get to this point. It's been a journey, therapy sessions.
Your home has been broken into, and you sleep with a firearm.
I do. I'm fully loaded.
I like that. I like that, by the way. Fully loaded. Beware.
I am.
It's obvious. Were you saddened by the outcome of the verdict in his trial?
Was I saddened by the verdict
in his trial?
Well, I mean, it's difficult. Puts me in a tricky situation because, he's at a place where he's having to take accountability for his bad decisions and his mistakes in life. And that's part of it. No matter who you are, the legal system is to hold you accountable. That's part of it. But I hate the conversation to give to my daughter where I have to say, there's a possibility that your daddy might go to prison, or your daddy's facing a even more difficult time, and I don't want to have that conversation with my child. And that my main priority in my life is my child and her well-being.
What do you find if women were to fall, and I don't want to use the word trap, but I'm using it, from your life and what you've experienced, because you've gone through so much. And I really appreciate, Lunden. I wish I was there. I wish I could give you a hug. I really appreciate you admitting the anger, the hurt, because it really takes a lot of courage. And that tells me you got a strong faith in God, something greater than yourself. And that comes across very strong from you. Yeah, it does. And I really appreciate that. And you're being on TV and sharing your story. What can other women learn from your journey?
That's a big part of this book. And there's so many stories and so many things that happen where, I found myself in a dark place. And there are so many times that women get pregnant and it's not a joyous time, and it's not a time to celebrate, and they feel like they're a burden. And it does put people in dark places. Mental health is real. Postpartum depression, all those things. And I hope that people can read this book, women especially, and it impact their journey. If they're going through something, anything similar, that they can relate to this, that it helps them overcome that dark time, and it helps them fight for their child. and stand for what's right.
What do you say?
Be an example for their child.
Yeah. What do you say to the critics that said your family are Trumpsters, their lawyers, his team have supported your efforts, there's an agenda here, blah, 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 blah?
Yeah, no, there's no agenda here. And people will know, reading the book, I discuss that. Politics aren't something, especially as of the past 5 years, we discuss in my family because, some of my family is conservative, some of them are not, and we choose to keep the peace by not discussing that. And it's like, the New York Times, I believe it was, wrote an article about a tale of two families, and that divide, that comes between us and the Bidens. And they have it all wrong. We're on Zoom, and Navy's on Zoom with her father, and we just happen to be at my mom and dad's house, and my mom's hiding because she doesn't want anyone to see that she doesn't have makeup on, so she doesn't want Hunter to see her. But my dad comes in, hey Hunter, how are you? And goes on. Like, it's that divide that people want to have there and want to see there doesn't exist, because the love we have for our child overcomes all of that. And so anybody in my family who has different political views, when it comes to a child, you put any of those views aside.
I think something we should always acknowledge, is that you are not disconnected from your parents. You are not in search of things. And, we have fun in life. We do crazy things in life, and we have regrets in life. And God not only forgives us, but restores us. But one thing that comes across from you, which I don't think you can really emphasize enough, is the importance of having your parents and the foundation of your family through it all, because that is the unconditional, that is the glue, that is what has helped you keep it all together through it all.
It is. And my father, when Hunter and I, during the child support dispute, where he was wanting to lower his child support, my attorney told me, I said, I'm having a hard time because, they felt like, this is Hunter getting his way out of it and whatnot. And I said I was having a hard time because I don't know what to do. And my attorney said, well, who's your one lifeline? Who is somebody whose advice you will just think is gold? And I said, my dad. And he said, then you call your dad up and you tell your dad what's going on. And you ask your dad what you should do. And my dad's advice to me was, you already know what you need to do. There is no amount of money you can put on a child's relationship with their father. There's no amount of money you can put on a father's love for their child. And he's like, I got you financially, any way you need it. And he does. My father is always in my corner. And he made it very clear. He said, you knew what decision to make before you called. And he was right.
How does one go out and get your book, Out of the Shadows, Lunden?
I believe you can pre-order it on Amazon. I think you can pre-order it on Target as well.
I can only imagine what it has taken to get you to this stage where you can do interviews in a very comfortable way, not knowing why you're coming on and knowing what the conversation is about. And you did good for yourself tonight. I'm very proud of you. I don't say that often as a host, but you're done good, girl. That's what my dad would say.
Thank you so much. It's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking. It's all part of coming out of the shadows.
Yeah, you did. Hey, look, you've done good for yourself tonight. And thank you so much for joining us. And I wish you and your daughter the best, and we'll keep your father in our prayers. Thank you for trusting us to come on our platform tonight. Thank you. And I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
And welcome back. Simon Hankinson is a senior research fellow for border security and immigration. You know, let's talk about the policy overview. Let's shift focus to President Biden's border policies. Can you, Simon, provide an overview of the key actions his administration that they're taking regarding border security and immigration reform?
Well, we can go back to the beginning. And in 2021, when he took office, President Biden systematically undid everything that not just President Trump, but previous presidents, Democratic and Republican, had done over the years to make sure that the border was somewhat secure. I think from 2014 to 2020, there was an average of about 50,000 encounters, they call them, at the border, so arrests of people who are crossing illegally. He stopped building the wall, any kind of barriers. He stopped the Remain in Mexico program, where people who applied for asylum were asked to wait out the process in Mexico, so they didn't get all the benefits up front. And we know that 95% of them, well, 85% are denied historically. And we know that if they're detained, about 98% will actually be sent back to their home countries. But once they get released into the country, it goes down to about 20% for adults, single adults, and then like 2% for unaccompanied minors and 6% for families. And then he started catch and release, which basically means that when someone shows up at the border, instead of being detained as the law requires, they just get told, here's a piece of paper, show up in a couple months in a court in this or that town. And oftentimes they don't show up at all. And so then what do? They're not tracked. There was a program they used for a while called Alternatives for Detention, which I've written about, but they've only used it for a couple 100,000 people out of the millions, maybe up to 5 million or more that they've released. So it was a deliberate policy from the beginning, and then now we're seeing what I would say is a pretty half-hearted attempt to be seen to be doing something, but which is just demonstrably not doing anything at the border if you see the footage and hear the reports.
How have these border policies impacted both the border communities and the broader national immigration landscape? And are there any significant successes or failures you'd like to highlight?
Well, I would call it a failure in the sense that we're not enforcing the laws. And I understand, I've been doing immigration, I've been writing about it since I was in college 35 years ago. And I understand there are opposing views. Some people want to have much higher levels of immigration, some people want to have lower levels. Some people are fighting for an amnesty for people who are living here illegally. Others, like myself, would say that simply just attracts more people to come. So you've got a massive debate going on about this. But what I had always imagined when I was working as a Foreign Service officer, and I've done 100,000 visa interviews in my time in Africa and Asia, I'd always thought that we did agree that we should enforce the law. We can fight about what it should be, we can try to change it, we can lobby Congress, and we can vote every November, every couple of years. But what we can't do is just ignore the law and throw it out the window. And that's what I've seen happen since 2021. In the same way that we see prosecutors just deciding they're not going to prosecute crime. You get to shoplift, you get to carjack, you get to do what you want to do. Sometimes 30, 40 times in places like New York where they have really soft prosecutors. We're doing the same with immigration. We're just not enforcing the law, and that's what upsets me the most, because if we lose the rule of law, if this president can just say, I'm not going to follow the rules that Congress has set for me, well, then the next president's probably going to do the same thing. And sooner or later, it might not be this election, but sooner or later there'll be a Republican president. And are we really wanting to live in a country where it swings wildly between one thing and another? Or do we want to live under the rule of law that applies to everybody?
What is exactly in the president's executive order? Some people say it's an executive order with no funding. What is it actually? Change? Does it lose? Does it have loopholes? Do you have to get up to a certain number before it takes effect?
The order kicks in, I think, at about 2,500 illegal crossers a day between ports of entry. And you got to remember, that's not including the 1,400 a day that are being admitted under the Biden parole programs, which is a whole different conversation. Those are utterly new and I would say made up and illegal. And I think that's something like 70,000 people a month that are coming under these parole programs. So imagine 2,500, you know, I'm terrible at math, but I think that adds up to, you know, over 1 million a year that are coming in, and then you count the gotaways, about 2 million people who just sneak in without inspection, and then another, you know, million or so paroled. You're talking about 4 million people a year that are just not being counted on the books. So let's just say you get above the 2,500 people coming in, I think it's a day, then you, in theory, they would shut down the border. Well, you know, I read in Politico that the border shuts down at midnight. But it really doesn't, because if you look at the exceptions to this rule, they accept unaccompanied children and people traveling with unaccompanied children, which is a scam, unfortunately, that a lot of people have caught on to. I mean, I'm sure some of these families are actually related, but many of them are not. And they've had the same kids cross over with multiple different people. They stopped doing DNA testing, so there's no way to really tell. They don't do bone density or any other testing to make sure that the minors are actually minors under 18. So you've got, you know, gang members in their 20s coming in claiming that they're children. So, you know, it's an order that's just riddled with loopholes. Another one is that Secretary Mayorkas can waive it when there are operational considerations. Well, you know, whether you like him or not, Secretary Mayorkas has proven that he's not a particularly safe pair of hands to put discretion in. His enforcement memo that he sent out to DHS basically said, just being here illegally is no reason to enforce the law. We only want to concentrate on, I don't know, multiple violent felons or terrorists or whatever. So you give him discretion, give him an inch, he's going to take a mile. And then they've added in, they've changed the rules a bit on what they call credible fear, so people who are going to go into the asylum pipeline, and almost encouraged people who come in to make sure they say the right things. And let's face it, with YouTube and WhatsApp and all the social media, if you show up at the border and you don't know the right words to say, you're really not doing your homework.
You know, you mentioned about the threat. You know, we just saw this situation in Maryland where this illegal killed the woman on a hike, and he had been involved in other rapes in his native country, and somehow or another he slipped through the ICE system. How threatened and how vulnerable do you feel we are as a result of the immigration policies by this administration?
Well, I mean, let's just say that the percentage of people coming in who are criminals is the same as it is in the population at large, right? We know that younger people commit more crime than older people. We know that men commit more crime than women. The population we're seeing at the border is not overwhelmingly, but the majority of them are men, and they tend to be young. They're coming from countries that have high rates of crime and really terrible record-keeping systems who don't share those records with us. So the murder rate in the United States is about 5 in 100,000. In our big cities, in some places, it's like 60 in 100,000, and you know, the quietest town in the country might be, you know, under 1. In Mexico, it's 27. In El Salvador, it used to be 65 or so, and it's now gone down to about 2 because of the policies of their president. So if, let's just say a guy shows up at the border, like the Venezuelan who is believed to have murdered Laken Riley in Georgia. He comes up to the border and says, I claim asylum, I'm afraid I can't go home. They release him with a notice to appear, and they say that they vetted him. What have they done? Well, they've run his name. Let's say his name is, you know, Juan Valdez, born January 1st, I don't know, 2004. How do they check that? Well, they can't. They check it against U.S. databases for all of the criminal activity that would have taken place in the U.S. But let's say he had been a member of a gang in Venezuela, as I think he was. We don't have a great relationship with Venezuela, so we can't call up the Maduro regime and say, hey, could you give us this guy's file? They won't do it. So they release that guy. He may have had, you know, tattoos and other signs that they didn't have time to check because they released him so quickly. The same with the poor woman who was killed in Maryland. The mother of 5 was killed by a Salvadoran who had already apparently committed murder in El Salvador, and I'm absolutely certain would have had a long rap sheet. But what did they know about him when they released him? They didn't know that. Did they have any way of checking? Well, they probably could have checked with El Salvador because we have a better relationship with their president, but did they have records? Did they have time? Did they know what to ask? Did they have the guy's real name, his real date of birth? So every single day, if they're releasing thousands of people, and I've been down to the border 5 times and watched them do it, there are going to be some of those guys who are no good. It's just an absolute numerical, statistical fact. So the risk is, unfortunately, every single day I read an article. We have a preventable crimes map at the Heritage Foundation where I work that shows cases of people coming in who then go on to commit crimes that are utterly preventable in the U.S.
What has been the reaction from both sides of the political spectrum to the policies of Mr. Biden at the borders? And how do you see this issue influencing upcoming elections and the overall political climate?
You know, I think there's a base of hardcore Democrats who believe in open borders ideologically. You know, they call themselves abolitionists sometimes. They want to abolish the criminal justice system, they want to abolish prisons, and they want to abolish immigration enforcement of any kind. They just believe that there should be open borders. I don't think that's a majority of the party, and it's certainly not a majority of Americans. I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was 6. I know a lot of immigrants. Immigrants have built this country, do great things. We already accept at least 1 million legal immigrants a year. But I think deep down, Americans believe in fairness and they believe in enforcing the law. And they don't see why, if there are people waiting in line for 20 years to get their visa from the Philippines, from India, from Mexico to come join their families, why should somebody who just rocks up at the border from Yemen, Cameroon, or Russia get in before them, or China? It doesn't seem fair. So I think over the years, the 3 years that Biden's been in power, we've swung the pendulum from, frankly, everybody vilifying President Trump for what he was doing to control the border, to perhaps initially letting President Biden do what he wanted to do and seeing what happened, to now seeing the consequences of unchecked, essentially open borders. Mayorkas himself, Secretary of Homeland Security, said that in December they were releasing over 85% of the people who showed up. Well, I've had people tell me, the border's not open, it's not an open door. And I said, well, if you push it a door 10 times and it opens 8.5 times out of that 10, what else do you call it? It's not closed. And so I think we've seen a poll last week, 62% of Americans said that they supported deporting people here illegally. You wouldn't have seen that 3 years ago. It's become the #1 issue for a lot of Americans, and it will have an impact in the elections.